Hi everybody, Jane here. Thank you so much for watching today. Now a few videos ago I made a video using the Granulating Watercolors from Kuretake, and I did a very sort of abstract background, so I thought it'd be fun to have a go at using them again today, but in a more sort of controlled colouring kind of way. Now, if you're great at drawing, you could draw out a scene, but I like to use my stamps because I've got quite a lot. So I decided to go in my Canson art book, which has only now got a few pages left to fill in, and I'm using some stamps that are in my stash that I've had for quite a while. So I will list them in the description box, but they're not necessarily ones that are still available. But I would suggest look through what you have and think about what you could use instead. Or you could use collage to do this, or like I say, you could draw your images yourself. So I'm using Versafine Clair in Nocturne, and that's an oil-based ink. And I'm using this one because it will be waterproof when I'm using the watercolours with it. However, you could also use something like archival ink as well. This one is a bit slower drying, so I did have to give it a bit of a heat with a heat tool afterwards. But I'm just sort of laying out my design, and I'm using the Rubber Dance stamp, which is the bird, and the flowers and leaves are from HunkyDory. Now, they didn't all stamp perfectly because this is watercolour paper and it's sort of on lots of layers, but I went in afterwards with my fountain pen. Now, this is the Lamy Safari and it's got waterproof black ink in it. And so I'm just going over where I feel that the stamping isn't quite as I wanted it. I wasn't too worried because I knew I was going to be colouring these with watercolours, and then I'm just drawing in a very, very simple branch because I didn't want my bird and flowers to just be floating in midair. I wanted it to be a sort of scene, so I'm just using that fountain pen to draw in the branches and the twigs coming off the branches down through so it all looked like one piece. Now, like I said, I did let that dry, and now I'm going to be doing some watercolouring. So I'm using the Velvetouch brushes from Princeton in a size 4, 6 and 8, I do believe it was. And I've got the two sets of the Kuretake Gansai Tambi granulating paints. Now, I do really enjoy using these for backgrounds because the bigger space you use them across, the more you get those splitting and granulating effects. But you can use them in this sort of project as well, but you're not going to see so much of the effect. So I'm putting water down first, then I'm going to add some colour and sort of dab it in with lots of water again to try to get the best I can. But like I say, these are smallish areas, so you're not going to get as much of the effects as you would if you did a big area of this colour. But they can still be used just as a paint. So, don't think that just because you're not using them to get the full granulating effect, you can't use them. So on the leaves here, I'm going in with the green, and then I go in with the olive green as well. And you're not really going to get any of that splitting effect because it is such a small area, but you're still getting the colour. So, you can still use them just as you would any other watercolour. So I do go through this whole process, colouring these in. And then I decided that these colours are quite muted. So I wanted something a bit brighter. So I've got some of the Qor Watercolors by Golden that are in a little ceramic palette, and I do add some of those in as well. Now, Qor are quite pushy colours, I would say. They like to flow because they have this synthetic oxgall in them, which called Aquazole, which means that they do flow. So I was being very careful with how I use them, but then I added those in to add a bit of brightness as well. Now I wanted to colour in the background with the granulating paints, and so I made sure that what was in the foreground was totally dry because I didn't want to reactivate that. However, I also was going to leave a little bit of a gap where I needed to around what I'd already painted in. I wasn't worried if there was little bits of white poking through because this is in my sketchbook. It's just for fun to have a go with. And I'm using the Cosmic Violet, I do believe. And I chose this colour because it splits into the purple and the blue, which I thought would be nice for a sky. So I'm going in with my bigger brush, lots of water down first, really making sure that that paint was nice and watery. And this way I did get a really nice granulating and splitting effect. Now, once again, I left this to dry on its own as long as possible, and you can see how well those colours have actually split this time. But I wanted to add a little bit more depth into my images, and so I'm going in with some pencils. Now this pencil case has a mixture of my Faber Castel Polychromos and the Caran d'Ache Pablo pencils. I love these pencils. They're a little bit harder. I do like a hard pencil. I keep my Derwent drawing pencils in a separate case so that I know that they are all together in there, and they are a lot softer in how they feel. I do enjoy these. In particular, I like using these pencils when I'm going over something like watercolour to add extra definition and colour in. And I wasn't trying to colour the whole things in, but I did want to just sort of add some shading and some extra colour. It just helps to lift them a little bit. So that's what I did with these pencils. So I did also add in some white highlights with my Posca pen, and then I decided a few gold splatters would just add a little bit of texture into the background. I did then think that I needed something else just to lift that background a little bit, or just to add a little bit more interest. And so I'm going with this little D'Inkable stencil from Be Crafty. It's one where it's more of a mask than a stencil because you're actually covering your pattern. So you're colouring the negative space rather than the positive space. And I'm using the Amsterdam acrylic in Buff Titanium Light, I think it was. And the thing I like about stencils is that you can add these in afterwards because you can see through where you are stenciling, so you don't need to worry about going over your main image. And then finally, I'm just adding on a little sentiment from Lemon Creation, and that just finishes it off. And I thought You Are a Song went with the bird. So thank you ever so much for watching my video today. If you have enjoyed it, do please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you could subscribe as well. There is also a hype button where you can help to promote the video through by giving extra points to it, and then YouTube know that it's something that people want to see, and that costs you nothing. And at the end, you'll also see a list of my lovely super supporters. They are part of my YouTube membership, so a big extra thank you to those for their extra support. And until the next time, bye bye.